You might get a different kind of shot. Not to quickly move out of the way though.
I'm not going to let you. I'm going to block you in.
One got off the stage by security.
Take us all out.
What's he doing? Standing? Why don't you know?
Because I didn't.
You've been down to help clean up the.
I did.
I think the old man was there, wasn't he?
Yes.
Good Samaritans, you're all.
You know.
Every little helps. Where's it going? Where's it going next?
No, the wheel.
Okay. Do you find it funny? They think the footfall was low in London. That's good. Here. Is it a ball?
When are we going to get down? After he comes back?
You're going to stay
That's the announcement.
Well, this doesn't look if everyone comes, does it?
Hello.
Go back down there so I can have you in my picture.
Does it work? Were you at the Champions League? Didn't see
It
you.
was meant to be.
Oh,
And
what
then they
happened?
brought Fassbender over from Dortmund instead.
Are you
So I got
joking?
bumped off it. I was the 6th. Yeah.
Tom, could you just leave on that?
I'm not gonna be your prop. That's really fucking annoying. Yeah. I was next to Elo.
No, I did the outside crap, but I had to do Tommy Robinson before that. Shit. Day of.
Fuck. Well, the
Yeah, for like a punishment for that.
Guys, watch the language. All your voices are
oh,
live.
sorry.
Okay.
I'm going to go back on that, but I'm not going to start a shout.
Very flickery. It's Midlands. Oh, you're in Bristol, aren't you?
Bristol now.
If we, which side are we going to get off the stage? Because if we all go one side, he'll get more.
Yeah.
Well, no, because that just.
Come this way and we'll go that way.
What's happening? That'd be good. That'd be good. It's amazing how many photographers they let in, please.
Let anybody in, won't they?
Very much. Bit mad. Is that your parking ticket? Oh, get started.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you very much indeed for coming this afternoon at very short notice. I'm Dr. David Bull. I'm Deputy Leader of Reform UK. I don't need to tell you this is an incredibly exciting time in British politics. Reform UK going up and up in the polls. And that's thanks in no small part to the gentleman I want to introduce to you now. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice.
Thank you, David. Lovely. Pleasure. Great to see you. Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everybody. Lovely to see you here in Glamis Hall. And goodness me, 12 days in. Does it feel like a lifetime? Anyone bored yet? No. No, we've been trying to create some interest in this general election campaign. And here we are. Everyone thought that Reform UK, that we'd get squeezed out. That was the Prime Minister's and the Tory strategy. They said, well, let's try and squeeze Reform down. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? What's happening to the polls? Are we going down? Are we voting? No. We're going up. Yes, totally contrary to the Tories' plans. Actually, we're going up in the polls. And that's because we've been talking about what the country wants to talk about. But the main two parties, they're too embarrassed to talk about it because it doesn't suit their narrative or because they've completely messed it up. Yes, this is and must be the immigration election. That's why when the news came out about Facebook, without spending anything on Facebook advertising, we're getting the most likes, the most shares, because we're talking about what people want to talk about. And then campaigning, end of last week, in Boston and Skegness, in Ashfield, we're getting a fantastic response. It is truly extraordinary, but something is going on out there. Word is spreading like wildfire. People know there is something fundamentally wrong with what's going on in our country. And people are working out what it is. I've talked about it. Nigel's talked about it. Huge unplanned increase in the population is putting massive pressure on housing, on rents, on the affordability of accommodation, the pressure on healthcare. And it's suppressing wages for the lowest paid, the least well off, and the young. And it's simply unfair. And at least we're prepared to talk about it, because that's actually what the country wants to be talking about, and that's why we're going up in the polls. And people are looking for a bit of interest. I mean, there's not much interest in the main two parties, in the polling. They're basically not moving, or the Tories are slightly slipping. Now, I've last week tried to install a bit of interest into this election. I've been talking about barbers. Others have been talking about hairdressers. It's getting people going. Why not? We need some interest. But how do we go from interest to real excitement? How do we actually energize this election? How do we really say, let's turn on the rocket boosters? If we're in our highest pollings, 14, 15%, that's good. I'm delighted with that. But I'm hungry for more. I'm ambitious. I want to do ever, ever better. And that's why I thought, better than this. We can go from 5th gear through to 6th gear. This is a fossil-fueled car, by the way. To 7th. What about 8th gear? What about turning on? How do we turn on the turbo boosters, the rocket chargers to this campaign? And as people know, I wanted Nigel to give as much energy and effort and commitment to this campaign as he felt able to do. Now, Sunak thought he'd got one ahead of us, and everyone fell for it. I thought, no, let's get some real excitement into that campaign. So the big question is, does Nigel want to stand? I've got a different question. And I think this may drive and excite and enthuse ever more action, ever more boost to Reform UK. I thought, well, actually, what I'd really like is to invite Nigel to be leader of Reform UK. And to my absolute delight, he accepted. And so that's what the plan is. And that's why I'm delighted to welcome my very good friend, Nigel, to the stage to take us forward from here. Thank you very much indeed.
Great stuff. Very, very good. Richard, thank you very much indeed. Now, we put out the operations notice for today under the title Emergency Election Announcement. And we did that because we think this election needs a bit of gingering up. Thus far, it is the dullest, most boring election campaign we have ever seen in our lives. And it's funny because the more the two big party leaders try to be different, the more they actually sound the same. We've reached such ridiculous levels that we saw yesterday on the Conservatives' social media a post about the cross-channel illegal migration crisis with Starmer's got no plan, the Tories have reduced cross-channel migrants by 36%. So they've even come to lying, because it's now up nearly 30% this year. Sir Keir Starmer overnight, of course, on this big issue of immigration, says that they are going to cut the numbers. He, of course, the man who campaigned not just for a second referendum, but a believer in open borders, and a man who was a lawyer, fought very, very hard for those that arrive on the back of lorries to get benefits once they got here. So, frankly, we're in a situation, I think, where nobody believes a word that they say, no one's listening, people are zoned out, and right at the minute, none of the above is top of the polls by a country mile. And the problem with all this is we know whoever wins, taxes will remain high. The highest tax burden since 1948. Everyone's promising not to put taxes up, but nobody talks about reducing the tax burden. We also know that our people are getting poorer. Yes, we had growth in the economy. The last set of figures was slightly better than before. GDP, they call it. We must all bow down to the god of GDP. In fact, the more immigration we have, the better the GDP numbers are, because there are more people in the country. But what about GDP per person, per capita? It went down by almost 0.7% over the last year. So we know that taxes will stay high. We know that mass immigration will continue regardless of which party wins power. We know that people will get poorer, but we also know that crime, or fear of crime, will get worse. London, even the wealthier parts of London, have been transformed over the course of the last few years. Crime is so bad now that people generally don't even bother to report it. But it's okay, you can go shoplifting and nick up to 200 quid's worth of kit before anybody is even going to prosecute you. And these are all symptoms of a country that actually is in decline. We're in economic decline in relative terms. Oh, sure, we're doing better than our former partners in the European Union, massively behind America and many other parts of the world. We're in social decline, and we're actually in a form of moral decline. We've forgotten who we are as a country. We heard a very impassioned speech by Keir Starmer this morning about D-Day, and he talked about his own brother serving on HMS Antelope in the Falklands. And he spoke actually with a great degree of passion. But here's a little statistic that sums up what's been wrong with our ruling classes. On Thursday of this week, there'll be massive international commemorations of D-Day, something in which the British played an extraordinary part, something which we can be just immensely proud of in terms of what we were able to organise, able to do, and the courage that people showed. But can you believe a poll out last week showed that 52% of 18 to 34-year-olds don't even know what D-Day is. And that's what you get when you're led by a career political class that don't really care about, are embarrassed to say anything that could be seen to be vaguely patriotic. Oh, we're told that Michael Gove and others have improved the education system. Well, anyway, if over half of our young people in this country do not know about an event that is within living memory and which should be one of the proudest things this nation has ever managed to achieve, something I think is fundamentally wrong at every level. The centre of gravity on every national debate has moved hugely to the left since 2010, when David Cameron and George Osborne took power. So we represent a very different kind of politics. We believe that the Westminster political class are now more detached from ordinary folk than they were even before that referendum stunned everybody back all those years ago now in 2016. Something has gone very, very wrong. What we also know is that the election is over. It's done. Labour have won the election. There is not a contest. There is a big MRP poll coming out on Sky News at 5 o'clock that will confirm all the things that we've seen before. Whether the Conservatives get 80 seats or 150 seats is now almost irrelevant. Starmer has won this election. And that's my fear. Nothing will change. Maybe things will get ever so slightly worse. Now, I stood here a week ago and I said, look, hands up. I've been nonplussed by Rishi calling a short-term election. Doesn't give me the time to fight a constituency. Doesn't give me the time to build up data. I thought the rational thing to do was not to stand, but to do my bit, as I put it, supporting the country around the party. And for the last week, that is what I've been doing. I've been travelling all around the country. I've had the honour of appearing with Piers Morgan on Question Time, amongst other things. I've been to Dover to talk about the migrant crisis that I alone predicted 4.5 years ago. But more importantly, I've been out on the streets, meeting an awful lot of people. And interestingly, a lot of people. And I'll tell you this, and you won't have got this yet, and the pollsters won't yet have picked this up, but I promise you, after 30 years of experience in this game, something is happening out there. There is a rejection of the political class going on in this country in a way that has not been seen in modern times. But the other thing that really shook me in a way last week were the number of people coming up to me on the street saying, Nigel, why aren't you standing? And I gave my logical, rational reasons for it. But I couldn't help, after each exchange, I simply couldn't help feeling somehow they felt I was letting them down, that I wasn't standing up for these people. People in their millions who've stood with me, in some cases, for many, many years. Election battles, referendums. And I guess I have been a champion for many of those people. I took the day off yesterday, had a normal day. Walked the dogs, did a bit of fishing, popped into the pub, you know, a normal sort of day, which gave me time to think and reflect. And I began to feel a terrible sense of guilt. Even if it is very difficult for me to find a parliamentary constituency, and it is hard. You know, here on radio and television about how many times I've stood. Most of the times I stood were for UKIP when we were a fringe party using elections as an effective pressure group to make our way through. And it is true. The one time I did stand and fight, the Conservative Party cheated against me in such a way that one of the party agents got a 9-month prison sentence, suspended. But of course the result stood. So all those things have been weighing on my mind. But difficult though it is, I can't let down those millions of people. I simply can't do it. It'd be wrong. So I have decided, I've changed my mind. It's allowed you now. It's not always a sign of weakness. It could potentially be a sign of strength. So I am going to stand in this election. I'll be launching my candidacy at midday tomorrow. in the Essex seaside town of Clacton. So midday tomorrow, Clacton, at the end of the pier. But perhaps more important than that, I've made a far bigger decision than that, which is, and I've talked to Richard, and he is happy about it. Oh, of course, you'll write your pieces about how badly we're all getting on, because that's journalism for you. Actually, I regret to say we're getting on quite well. But Richard is more than happy for me to put my head and shoulders firmly over the parapet and take the flak. So I'm coming back as leader of Reform UK, but not just for this election campaign. I'm coming back for the next 5 years. And there is one very simple reason for that. We all know already that the Conservative Party will be in opposition. But it won't be the opposition. They are incapable of it. They've spent most of the last 5 years fighting each other rather than standing up and fighting for the interests of this country. They are split down the middle on policy, and frankly right now, they don't stand for a damn thing. Our aim in this election is to get many, many millions of votes. And I'm talking far more votes than UKIP got back in 2015, when we got 4 million votes. We're going to get many, many, many more votes than that. How many seats in Parliament can we win under this system? Well, that's another matter. And that depends on what momentum we can get from here. When people start to realise in the red wall, with Reform second to Labour, when they start to realise that actually in those seats, it's a Conservative vote that's a vote for Labour. It's a Conservative vote that is a wasted vote. Then I think we might just surprise everybody. And I know that you all think that our votes will simply come from the Conservatives and they'll get crushed. Believe me, this Conservative Party under Rishi Sunak, who nobody ever voted for, not even the Conservative Party members voted for, this party needs no help in being crushed. It's crushed itself already. And those people who already say they'll vote Reform, very few of them would go back to the Conservatives even if we stood down. So we are appealing to Conservative voters. We are appealing to Labour voters. And those commentators and journalists that are longer in the tooth might remember that in 2015, against all predictions, we took more votes from the Labour Party than we took from the Conservative Party. So Keir Starmer, yes, he'll win, but we're absolutely going to make sure his percentage is a lot smaller than it is now. But perhaps above all, what we're appealing to are those who intend not to vote, because they don't believe there's anybody within the Westminster establishment that actually stands up for them. Very often they're people running small businesses, acting as sole traders. They run a plumbing company, they run a taxi company, whatever it is. They know, and they're right, that nobody in Westminster is on their side. Nobody in Westminster even understands what they do. And what we're going to put forward over the next few years are men and women that will stand for us, represent us, who've got real life experience. For us, this is not just an extension of being in the Oxford Union. It isn't just some great big game. It's actually about our country and its people. And we're worried and we're fearful of many of the impacts that we've seen. We find what happened after those local elections just a few weeks ago, of candidates winning in Leeds, in Burnley, in Bradford and elsewhere, standing, shouting, Allahu Akbar, standing, shouting, we are coming to get you. The birth of sectarian politics in our country, caused by massively irresponsible immigration policies. And it was the Labour Party that opened the door. And who would have believed that a Conservative Party would have accelerated it? To anyone that says to me, well, surely you won't stand against Bill Bloggs, because he's a really good bloke and he was a Brexiteer. The answer is 2.4 million. 2.4 million people this Conservative government have allowed to settle in the UK in the course of the last 2 years. So whether Bill Bloggs is a good bloke or not, he has actually been part of what is a massive betrayal of 17.4 million people who voted Brexit. They voted yes to get back our independence, but they absolutely voted to get back control of our borders. And Richard said earlier that this is the immigration election. Well, it is. We have to build a new house every 2 minutes just to accommodate those that are legally coming in to Britain. The impact on the health service, the impact on infrastructure, on everything else. We have to get a grip. It is the major issue of our times. The population explosion has devalued the life of ordinary Britons in just the most extraordinary way. And even if those in Westminster don't know it, I promise you that those outside of it do. Now, I want to pay tribute to Richard, who has kept this party going during times when he was told there was no need for it. No need for it. Boris has an 80-seat majority. They're going to deliver Brexit and everything the Brexit voters wanted. Well, Richard has kept this going at great personal cost in terms of time and money. I'm very pleased to say Richard, from this moment, is going to be chairman of this party and, I hope, is going to spend as much time in Boston and Skegness whilst I'm taking the flak, so he can go up there and win that constituency. And I think back, actually, in Boston, Richard, to 2015, when UKIP put up a 21-year-old candidate who was a bit green, to say the least, 15,000 votes. I'm sure you're going to get many, many more than that. So the really big message here is, what I'm really calling for, and what I intend to lead, is a political revolt. Yes, a revolt. A turning of our backs on the political status quo. It doesn't work. Nothing in this country works anymore. The health service doesn't work. The roads don't work. None of our public services are up to scratch. We are in decline. This will only be turned around with boldness. We will only recover our position through economic growth. That will only come when we get away from just half a dozen multinationals dominating the thought of our politicians and allowing real entrepreneurship to flourish. So we're very, very much on the side of the little guy and woman. We're very much on the side of creating growth. We're very much on the side of ending the poisoning of our education system, where 50% of young people don't even know what D-Day is. So make no mistake, we are unashamedly patriotic. We believe that it's right to put the interests of British people first. We believe Brexit needs to be implemented properly, and we are going to be the voice of opposition. And I tell you what, I've done it before, I'll do it again, I'll surprise everybody. Thank you. Okay. Right. Well, as is customary with everything Richard and I do, you can all ask as many questions as you want. Name and company. I do know, but name and company first.
Christopher Hope, GB News, Mr. Farage. You tried before. You haven't won several times. You admitted that. Why can you win this time without the data? You don't know where you're living, Clacton, where your sports in Clacton. And the second question is, what's your ultimate goal? A 5-year plan to replace the Tory party as the main opposition party in this country if Labour win?
Point one, I made the point to you, Chris, earlier. I only stood once in earnest. All the previous times were as a pressure group to raise the profile of why we believe leaving the EU made sense when nobody else in Parliament was saying it. I did stand that one time. I did lose. I mean, I don't mind losing, but when they cheat, so much so that one of the party agents gets a 9-month prison sentence, you can perhaps understand why I'm not that friendly with the Tory party. All this, are you going to do a deal with the Tory party? I mean, not on your Nelly is the answer to that. Look, it's very difficult in the space of a few weeks, from scratch, for me of all people, given what they're going to throw at me, to win a parliamentary constituency. But I repeat the point I made. You know, I can't turn my back on the People's Army. I can't turn my back on those millions of people who followed me, believed in me, despite the horrendous things that were being said about me in 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16. You know, they're still there. They're still there. And they want someone to believe in. But you can add to that a younger cohort. I said earlier, Richard said the same, something is going on. Isn't it amazing? We haven't spent a bean on Facebook pushes or advertising, and yet of the top 50 most liked posts on Facebook in the first week of the campaign, 32 are reform. Even the Today programme, what a shame Nick Robinson's not here, it really is. But even the Today programme, doing a feature on TikTok this morning, saying just how many young people are saying vote reform. We're not putting money into it. This is happening organically. Something remarkable is going on. The one prediction I'll make, Chris, is we will get many, many more votes than the 4 million that UKIP got in 2015. Many, many more votes. We will win seats. I don't know how many. The crucial part of this campaign will be getting those people who are saying now they'll vote Labour, but I suspect in many cases that's through disgust, to vote for something they really believe in. And the plan, look, we're a very new party. Election at short notice, no, we're not making any bones about it. It's damn difficult. But just because something's difficult doesn't stop you doing it. The real plan will be the opposition party in the next parliament and the biggest party at the 2029 general election. That is the ambition. Simple as.
Thank you very much. Andy Bell, 5 News. Nigel Farage, haven't you just made Keir Starmer the happiest guy in British politics right now because you've just ensured that a whole lot of Conservative seats that might have stayed Conservative will not be Conservative next time around?
Exactly the same question I was asked in 2015. Exactly the same question. Oh, you'll damage the Tories' hopes, and we took more votes than we took from the Conservatives. And you were all wrong. All of you were wrong in 2015. No is the answer. Those people currently saying they'll vote Reform won't vote Conservative. They've gone. The Red Wallers feel completely betrayed. The promises that Boris Johnson made, and frankly, I'm not sure now he believed in himself, they've gone. They're not. What we'll do from here, be quite interesting actually, I think we'll draw fairly evenly from now on from Conservative and the Labour Party. You watch the polls. I said it every time, Andy asked me the same question. But I think you'll see we're going to start drawing from Labour equally as much as the Conservatives. I've got to reiterate this. The Conservative Party have lost this election without my intervention. It's done. Trust is broken. Trust is gone. And maybe that's why there's so little coverage of what's going on the election, because kind of people know the result. I've thrown myself into this today, not just to sort of entertain everybody, but because I genuinely think that something remarkable can happen. At least that's what I'll try for.
BBC News. Margaret Thatcher famously said she wasn't for turning. You are obviously for turning. Why the massive U-turn all of a sudden?
Have you never changed your mind about anything? Well, I tell you what, if you've never changed your mind, you are a remarkable human being. I read your book. I'd love to follow it. No, I mean, look, this is the old thing about hearts and heads, isn't it? I rationally thought this was too difficult. I've changed my mind because I can't let down millions of people who would feel let down by me unless I was at the front and let over the course of the next 5.5 years. That is why I've changed my mind. I can't let those people down. I won't let those people down. The amount of guilt I felt yesterday, simply thinking about it, was too much. But I also know, just as throughout Europe, there is a new phenomenon racing through politics ahead of these European elections this weekend, I promise you, something is happening out there. I've been in this game 30 years. I fought lots of elections. I've generally got a pretty good sense of timing. Something is happening out there. So yes, I changed my mind, and you know what? I'm not ashamed of it one little bit. We've got another one in the front row here.
Shihab Khan from ITV News. You mentioned that you're going to be contesting across the country. The system is designed in a way which it means it will be quite difficult for you to win a number of seats. What would be viewed as a success here now that you're running? How many MPs do you need to win to say this election has gone well? I
agree with you. Electoral reform is vital. It's absolutely ridiculous that we have no proportionality in our system whatsoever. Blair looked at this way back in the 90s. AV Plus was the proposal where you'd vote for an MP but have a second vote to get representation in Parliament for big views. All I can tell you is this. If we get a massive, massive vote and a relatively small number of seats, then the call for reform will be there. And I want to reform the electoral system. I want to reform the sheer corruption of the House of Lords, where, you give enough money, you get a seat in the House of Lords. We are a radical party. We don't think the current political structure works for our country anymore. Success on the one hand for me will be standing up and fighting for what I believe in, rather than running away from it, rather than answering the previous question. We're going to get a huge number of votes. I think they can't get more votes than the Conservative Party. I genuinely do. And you can all hold me to that in a few weeks' time. But I genuinely believe we can get more votes in the election than the Conservative Party. They are on the verge of total collapse, and it couldn't happen, frankly, to nicer people. But I say that because in 2019, I got Mrs. May. We formed the Brexit Party. Within 6 weeks, Richard and I got rid of Mrs. May. We then stood aside for Boris. I didn't even get a thank you. So I don't think they're terribly nice people, and I genuinely mean that. We will win seats in Parliament. How many? I don't know. All depends how much momentum we can build over the course of the next few weeks. Thank you very much indeed. One more in the end. I will get to all of you, I promise.
Claudia
I
Savage
promise.
from PA. The fact that you're making this announcement here and not in Clacton, does that stand as proof that you care more about the London media than you do about your future constituents?
Are you coming to Clacton at 12 o'clock tomorrow? Answer the question. Are you coming to Clacton at 12 o'clock tomorrow?
Is the bus going?
I tell you what, I'm going to be in Clacton at 12 o'clock tomorrow. Why do it here in London? Because this is where you all are. And you hate leaving your little bubble, don't you? No, I don't mean that. I will be. You're very welcome to come to Clacton tomorrow. There's a very good Wetherspoons there. Now, let's keep going. Lady there.
Hi, Natasha Clark from BBC. When did you decide to make this decision?
2 o'clock yesterday afternoon.
Whose decision was it? Yours or Richard Tice's?
Well, ultimately, it was my decision to say I'm going to put myself forward and say to Richard, are you happy with this? And he's more than happy with this. In fact, I think he's delighted with it, actually. So we've talked on and off about this, of course, for months. And I've been very reluctant to do this. Very reluctant. I mean, to be honest, I've been reluctant because I've actually rather enjoyed life at GB News. And it's been a great job. Best job I've ever had. I did enjoy your mob as well when I was there. But then again, I got sacked, but I'm used to that. It happens quite regularly. No, I've loved being at GB News and doing a show 4 nights a week and doing extra stuff and travelling around the country and all of those things. So giving that up's not an easy thing.
Your plan to do this today, to come here today, to stand and to swap jobs with Richard Tice, that was your idea or his idea? The conversation that you guys had and you decided to do it together.
Do you think he's been bullied and strong-armed or something? I mean, what are you suggesting? No, it's a very silly question. Never mind. Let's go on.
Thank you. Kate McCann at Times Radio. Can I ask you if there was a particular moment? You mentioned meeting people and people saying they felt let down. Was there one interaction that really made this for you? And did you discuss it with Donald Trump? Did you seek his advice at all? And just finally, I believe you have a candidate already in Clacton, so what's going to happen to him? Thank you.
Well, yeah, no, you're right. There is a candidate in Clacton, and, he knew for many, many months that this was a possibility. For many, many months, this was a possibility. Not a probability, but a possibility. Did I discuss it? No, I think the Donald's got other things to be dealing with just at this moment in time. He's been rather busy, including joining TikTok and suddenly racing up to ridiculous. I think it was particularly in Skegness, actually. Particularly in Skegness. A constituency. In 2013, UKIP won 16 county councillors on Lincolnshire District Council. I mentioned earlier the seat that Richard's standing in, where we, got 15,000 votes from a candidate who was incredibly young. So it's one of those places that I've campaigned a lot over the years. There was one particular interaction in the street with a bloke, and he sort of shrugged his shoulders and said, "Well, okay, mate, I'm not going to give you a hard time or slag you off," but I just felt, and then the next morning I was in Ashfield with Lee Anderson and getting the same thing. And then I got home late Saturday night and had time to think about it. And then Sunday morning I just thought, I'm just not feeling good about this. I'm letting people down. Better to fight something that is very, very difficult you know, where the outcome is far from certain. Better to do that than let people down. And I wanted the UK to be an independent country, to be a self-governing country. And, you know, I was pretty alone on that for many, many years, and we did achieve it. And I'm very proud of the fact that I spent all that time doing it. But I just think the way we're being governed, I think, is disconnected from ordinary folk. I just think we're failing. And I genuinely believe that the choice between these two men is very, very narrow. The narrowest it's ever been at any British general election, I think, in modern times. Sir.
Good afternoon, Nigel. Nick Ellaby Talk. Did Donald Trump's conviction help you change your mind? And how are you going to use Brexit to improve Britain's financial situation?
Okay. Donald Trump's conviction made no difference to me at all, and the whole thing was a complete through court from start to finish, utterly ludicrous. One looks at what Clinton and various other presidents have done. I mean, the fact that he even came to trial, I think it's a travesty. I've now no doubt he'll win the presidential election. But America becomes ever more divided, and the whole thing becomes ever more worrying. Look, you know, I've made my mind up. I'm going to do what I'm going to do, all right? I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And I believe I'm right in doing it. And if I win, I win. If I don't, I don't. But many other Reform candidates are going to win. We are self-governing. I mean, the economics of this are the least of the problems. You know, we've gone from 7th to 4th in terms of global exporters. We're doing far better economically, as I mentioned earlier, than our former colleagues, partners in the European Union. There are many other things on the cost of living that we'll talk about in the next couple of weeks. In particular, why we're paying the most ridiculous energy bills and have been for the last 20 years, green subsidies, not being self-sufficient in energy, all of that will come. Lady there.
Thank you, Jerry Scott from The Times. Mr. Farage, you spoke about kicking things up into the 8th gear. What are we going to see differently now to what has already come? And do you hope your return is going to bring in more donations? You made a point that Richard put a lot of his own money in. How do you hope to kind of remedy that situation? Yeah,
the donation thing last week did start to turn, actually. Did start to turn. We started to get some serious money coming into the party last week. Again, it's all a bit last minute. 8th gear, which Richard talked about, I just think we're just going to do more of what we've been doing with an even higher level of energy, higher level of optimism. And you know what? The money is going to come. We will have enough money. We're not going to have 30 million. But as the Facebook example I gave earlier proves, actually, we're doing very, very well on a limited budget. It's amazing what a well-aimed stone from a sling can do. Lady there. I'm coming. Don't worry, I won't forget over here. No, I won't.
Sophie Huskisson from The Mirror. So you've announced you're standing for MP to become MP for Clacton.
Yes.
This is despite you previously having said, and I quote, "Do I want to spend every Friday for the next 5 years in Clacton?"
That's right.
What's changed your mind on Clacton?
That's right. You're absolutely right. It's a massive... You're absolutely right. It's a huge commitment. It is a huge commitment. I said earlier, in answer to the question there from LBC, I said earlier that actually working at GB News is the best job I've ever had. I haven't had to travel up and down the country. I was 21 years an MEP. You know, I know what it's like to travel around constituencies, to meet people. It's a huge effort. And part of that weighing up factor was absolutely the question you asked. Am I prepared to give the time, not just to politics, but to a constituency as well? And the demands of a parliamentary constituency are greater, even though they're smaller, than the demands of an MEP constituency, necessarily. You know, surgeries, meeting people, all of those things. You are absolutely right. I'm making a massive potential commitment, if I win that seat, to this and to those people. Thank you for the question. Gentleman there.
Thanks. Ben Quinn from The Guardian. Mr. Farage, is this the moment at which the actual candidate in Clacton is finding out that he is no longer the candidate? and also, what does it say about the way you view democracy, that these types of backroom changes of leadership can happen?
Sorry, I almost nodded off then. I really do apologise. He knew 6 months ago that it was a possibility, all right? He knew it was a possibility. And is my standing in Clacton going to help 600 other candidates? I think it may well do, all right? And sometimes tough things have to be done. You know, it's not an easy game. Right, we're going to go over here. We're getting a bit bored with the right wing. Let's go over here.
Mr. Farage, Harry Fawcett from Channel 4 News. You say this has been in the works for some months. Until a couple of days ago, you were definitively ruling it out.
Yeah.
You're accusing the Tories of lying, of people not believing a word they have to say. Why should people, from this point, believe a word you have to say?
Hang on, I said I've been planning for months to do it. I've said already I'd planned to run. I was actually going to launch in this room. All right. I didn't do it because of the short-term campaign that was called. I thought I could serve the cause better going around the country, as I've done for the last week with a fair degree of energy. All right? I've just realised it doesn't work. The formula doesn't work. People don't buy it. They want me in the front lines. They want me to take the flak, and that's why I'm back doing it. So I haven't been dishonest with anybody. I have changed my mind. I've not been dishonest with anybody, least of all myself.
Jane Merrick from the I newspaper. You said that you would get more than 4.5 million votes that you did in 2015. Will you resign if you don't get that target? And then secondly, are you still planning to help your friend Donald Trump with his Republican campaign?
If I don't get that result, I'll go down the pub and have a think about it, all right? And be very disappointed. No, look, I haven't changed my mind, conviction or not. I haven't changed my mind that the world will be a safer place with Donald Trump in the White House. I think the weakness that we've seen under Joe Biden has encouraged, President Xi, etc. The world will be a safer place with Donald Trump. Clearly, if I'm elected the MP for Clacton, and I'm there every Friday, as the Mirror pointed out to me very helpfully, it'll become more difficult, but not impossible. All right? Okay. Yes, Sky at the back there.
Thanks very much. Richard Tice mentioned just now that the polls aren't moving. I guess that also reflects your performance so far. Is this decision in part a reflection of the fact that you don't think the campaign has got off to the start that you were hoping? And do you think that you're bigger than this party?
I would say this to you. The Conservative Party's first week, above all, has been to crush the Reform vote. We're bringing back national service and nonsense like that, which isn't actually true anyway. It hasn't worked. We've gone up on the week, not down on the week. The point Richard made was we're 3 points up with most pollsters on last week than we were before. So actually, given the onslaught, we think we're in a pretty good shape. All right? We think we're in pretty good shape. What we now have to do is to get the big push up. None of you believe it's possible. Just you watch. I think what we've done today will inject some energy and some optimism into the campaign. We'll reprioritise what we're all doing. I'm bullish about this. I really, really am. I'm pretty bullish about this. Okay, let's keep going. A few more. I know time is running on.
Hi, Nigel. Christian from the Daily Express. You've spoken very passionately this afternoon about everything wrong with Britain and the current party system, but would you outline for our readers what Reform's optimistic, positive view of where Britain needs to go is? And can you confirm whether you'll be representing Reform at BBC's seven-way debate on Friday?
Do you know, Richard and I mentioned this in the car on the way here. There are a number of debates. We haven't had time to work it all out yet, all right? But we will, between us, we will cover all of it. I have to say, seven's an awful lot, isn't it? But hey, there we are. I'm sure Plaid are a very important party, and we should all see them in our houses in Gloucestershire or wherever it is. So I haven't worked all of that out, all right? We've got a lot more to work out over the course of the next couple of days. I did not come fully to this decision until 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon, having taken a previous tack the week before, and that's where we are. Okay, I've got to do a few more. Yeah, one. Because people are getting bored.
Thank you very much, Nigel Farage. Jack Elson from The Sun.
Yep.
Many people will be surprised by this announcement because for the past week, you and Richard Tice have been saying that he's the leader and you're just helping out.
Yep. So
what is it? Can you just spell out that you have that you don't think he has? And secondly, if Donald Trump was British, do you think he'd be in Reform UK?
Well, he was in Reform USA, wasn't he? You know, when Ross Perot set up Reform USA, Trump was briefly a part of it. But of course, remember, it was Reform Canada that completely transformed the landscape in Canadian politics. And one of the reasons that I chose the name Reform, having been the Brexit party before, was I was thinking about that precedent in case the Tory party let us all down, which indeed they have. Look, you know, I've been doing this longer than Richard. I have, as I've said already 2 or 3 times today, there's a people's army out there that I built up over many, many years, and they're still there. And they're very fond of Richard, but they know me a little bit better. It's just as simple as that, sir.
Thanks very much. Emilio from Politico, 2 questions. Firstly, I know you've said that you're not interested, but have the Tories been trying to do some kind of deal with you at all? And if so, could you give us any details? And secondly, are you bidding to be Prime Minister in 2029?
There has been no attempt at seduction at all, at least not that I've noticed. So I don't think that's happened at all. I'm aiming for this political party to become the voice of opposition in the next Parliament. I'm sure we're going to achieve that because the Conservatives are incapable of doing that. And in 2029, do you know what? By then, somebody younger and better may well have come along. But if I can help get it moving, help keep it moving, I'll be delighted with that. For me, politics has never been about rank, title and position. For me, politics has always been about changing things, about changing narratives, about changing outcomes. You know, well, yeah, look, if we get to that point in 29 and I'm still standing up, who knows? Chap at the back.
Hi, Nigel. It's Joe Mays from Bloomberg. If Reform does well at this election and the final result is narrower than the polls suggest, and you found yourself in a position to influence the composition of the next government, would you help the Tories back into power, or would you rather Keir Starmer became Prime Minister?
Oh, goodness me. I mean, I haven't got time for all this. It's all too complicated. Look, let's just fight the campaign for the next 4 weeks, shall we? You know, I would, you know, if we were in a position to influence anything like that, as indeed the Lib Dems found themselves with Clegg back in 2010, well, you know, I think our objectives would be pretty simple, wouldn't they? You know, no betrayal of Brexit and proper control of our borders, and whichever one offered the best would be the best. At the moment, I can't see either. Sir.
Hello, Tom Scotsman from Politics Home. Is this the moment now you're expecting, or would you accept more Conservative candidates to come into the fold for Reform UK and hopefully campaign for your party? And is that something that you've been thinking of?
I think in a week's time, the polls will look very different. As I say, you'll begin to see that a Conservative vote is a wasted vote in the red wall. I think much may change. Right, I've done my best. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you on the campaign trail.